Hello, hello. So, as mentioned in the last news update, I had intentions on doing something resembling a tier list type video. I actually started recording one of those, and I was like at the end of Crimson Rampage after like 50 minutes, and I realized that was just going to take way too long for me to do it in any sort of thorough way. So we've backed up a bit. We're just going to do kind of a meta overview instead, not necessarily, you know, sticking a flag on the ground or putting down any takes as to what I think is better or not better, but just sort of where we're at after the Yu Yu Hakusho Dark Tournament Wish event, in which you are only allowed to play Dark Tournament characters, heading into the webcam regionals this coming weekend, as well as, you know, a bunch of stores are starting to spin up their local qualifiers, and then next month we'll have the in-person major regionals all across the globe. So just kind of going to talk about where things stand right now in my perception, right? A lot of this is going to be based on just what I see and hear in like the discords and the conversations that I'm in. It's not like we have... we never have a particularly big sample size, but we definitely don't have a sample size for this format. If you're newer to the game, we just had a big rotation where the first My Hero Academia set rotated out. This marks the start of the new standard rotation that they're going to be doing, which is the current year plus the 2 prior years. And that first MHA set had a lot of staples in it, a lot of, you know, very good characters, some power level outliers, that sort of thing. So with that leaving on top of Yu Yu Hakusho Dark Tournament coming in, it's a bit of a shake-up to some extent. We can't really use any events much as data to tell what's good or not outside of just like eyeballs, just kind of thinking about things. What are people talking about? What people tried and said that worked out? But we did have that Wish tournament. So what I'm going to do here is on the left side, I have stuff that's kind of known quantities-ish, stuff that's getting a lot of buzz. Again, you know, so far as I can tell, stuff that I would expect to see represented at this webcam regional, perhaps at your local qualifiers, that sort of thing, to some extent or another. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll all do good, right? Some of these decks could just not be up to it, right? And then the stuff on the right side is things that either, you know, I'm personally a little bullish on, stuff that maybe used to be popular that I'm not sure if it's still going to be, characters that are maybe a little more roguey picks, characters that are going to take just more work and more time to figure out, you know, if they're good or not, what their best builds are. So like there's all stuff that I could see showing up and doing well at a regional. I'm just not going to say I'm anticipating it right now, but any one of these, or even some that I left off of here, right, could show up and make a top cuts or make a run. That's just kind of how this game is. There's too many characters to have really well-refined, known builds for all of them, and we don't always know, you know, what's the best thing that this character can do or not do. We never really know that, right? Because most characters just don't have that much collective time put into them amongst the player base. So, starting out, you know, we'll talk about the anticipated stuff and then move over to the other column, or maybe I'll bounce left and right here. This is going to be a kind of a static video. I do have the ability to flash UVS Ultra up on the screen, but I might not do it too much here. We'll see how it goes, but we'll start with the elephant in the room. Younger Toguro completely and utterly dominated the Yu Yu Hakusho Dark Tournament Wish event. Once again, the wrinkle in that is that only Dark Tournament characters were allowed, which in his case meant that outside of maybe Byakko, there weren't too many really strong offensive characters to, you know, challenge him on that angle, right? It was pretty much Younger Toguro and Byakko and not much else in terms of characters that were putting lots of damage on everything. So it was a bit of a weird meta for him, but nonetheless, very, you know, huge representation. 7 out of the top 8 won the event. You know, people calling for bans, etc., 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 right? So if you're not familiar with him, if you're coming in from like Critical Role or whatever, I can't go into the full explanation for all these or it'll take forever, but basically he puts damage on all his moves based on half of his foundations. So that goes up over the course of the game. It'll be 2 on turn 2 usually, and then it'll be like 3, 4, and eventually 5 damage on everything. And that's kind of free. And then the first attack each turn, after it resolves, he can build it right down to his stage out of his card pool. So he gets rid of that progressive difficulty, and he gets a foundation out of it. So he can play pretty long strings pretty easily. There's a death list that has a lot of card draw effects in it, so he can keep finding more attacks. And it's just a numbers thing, right? At some point, if you're playing 5 moves that are all 8, 9, 10 damage, your opponent can't keep blocking all of those forever. And because he's drawing all these cards, and because his character handles so much of his offense, most of his foundations can be pretty defensive in nature if he wants them to be. So if he's not selling all the way out trying to kill you, then actually dealing damage to him and chunking through his 32 health is not as easy as you might imagine from a quote-unquote aggro deck. Because he just gets to play all the defensive ones. Just as many as he wants, really, right? There can be some card draw effects in this stage and some other stuff, but a bit of a tough cookie, especially in a format where there aren't too many other, offensive output character options. So that's Toguro. We'll see how he fares in the larger meta. He's a bit similar shaped to the second group that I'm calling the Jetburn 6-hand size character squad. This isn't exactly Jetburn characters, but the Jetburn set, the 6th My Hero Academia set, had a lot of aggressive 6-hand size characters that were putting stats on everything and at some sort of scaling, some sort of way in which they got better as the game went on. And so on the anticipated side, some of this is guesstimation, but these are the ones that were kind of popular circa the HLC. And I'm just gonna, the HLC being the World Championships that happened in January? Early February, something like that. And I'm just going to assume for now that any or all of them could continue to be popular in this post-rotation meta. First one is Endeavor 3. He won the World Championships. The deck that won the World Championships got completely gutted by rotation, so we don't really know if he's going to show up or not. He's certainly going to look different to the winning deck, but there were lots of people playing Endeavor that were not playing that list, right? It was sort of a new innovation that we saw there. But, he certainly has every chance to be popular. Mount Lady, pretty much all these characters put damage on everything, except for Endeavor, who puts speed on everything and eventually puts damage on everything. But Mount Lady puts damage on everything and eventually makes a big unblockable move. Ryukyu puts damage on everything and has a bunch of ways to loop attacks, and she draws cards on most of her attacks. She's very similarly shaped to younger Toguro, and she was kind of fine in the last meta, which is, maybe copium, but that's sort of the reason why there's some cause to believe that younger Toguro in the broader meta is kind of just going to be fine, is because Ryukyu is similar in a lot of ways. Not quite 32 health, merely 28, right? But she has a lot of the same stuff going on, and she's kind of manageable and fine in the prior meta, but she could still be around. Katsuki Bakugo is pretty popular at Worlds. He's, again, putting damage to everything. He has some more hoops to jump through, but bonuses, he can make you discard cards from your hand and make it, harder for you to have enough blocks to work with. And Nicholas Wolfwood from the Trigun Challenger deck puts damage on everything, and can draw a couple extra cards at the start of his turn if he gets momentum. So I would expect probably not all of those to have good representation, but I'm sure at least, probably 3 of them will, or 4 of them, if not all 5. But they'll be around and about, and they're sort of the center of gravity of this meta, are all of these 6-hand size characters that are just slamming stats on everything, and if you're not, really well prepared to defend yourself on turn 2, or if you don't just have a ton of health, they can just kill you on 2 if they draw the good ones and they check well. Sometimes even if you are, trying to have a really defensive deck, they'll draw hot and kill you anyway, so they're very kind of easy to find success with. If you're a newer player, it's not, there's not a ton of moving parts necessarily. You're not necessarily going to dominate a tournament with them, but you might win more games than you're going to win with a more technical character if you're pretty early in your playing career. So a lot of people gravitate to these characters. There's a lot of known lists out there for them, so I would expect to see plenty of those, and that's kind of the main thing that you need to be prepared for. On the sort of maybe side are, a few more of these 6-hand size characters that put stats on everything that either, Spike, we haven't really seen, is also newer. He wasn't as popular as Wolfwood sort of in early response, but they weren't legal for that world, so we don't really have a read on that sense, but just get the impression there's probably going to be less Spikes. There's some people that are high on him, but he's going to take some work to figure out. He puts speed and damage based on the number of face downs he has, so he takes a little bit of time to get going. You have to deal with the fact that none of your foundations do anything because they're all face down, but the payoff is possibly there, so he could be pretty good. We'll have to see what refined builds look like. Dabi 1 is an old character from the second MHA set that got a couple really spicy new tools in the Dark Tournament set, and we'll see how that develops. Uraka and Todoroki are just jet burn characters that didn't... people tried them, they didn't quite have the success or didn't quite catch on the same way some of the other ones did, but that doesn't mean that they can't. There's some cool stuff that they've each gotten from the new set, and we just have to see if anybody does anything with them. The next group here is what I'm going to call the old guard six-handers on the left. These are just Murio and Overhaul. These are just the starter Clash deck characters from the Undaunted Raid set. They've both been very good and very prevalent in the meta, in their meta since they released. They kind of started to see less of them when the Jet Burn set came out and all the shiny new 6-hand size, even more stats toys, but Murio and Overhaul are a little bit more two-way characters, so I call them two-way on the other side here, where they have offensive output and they have good offensive output and things they can do, but they've also got some defensive tooling built in. Murio can reset an attack to 0 damage if he pays a momentum, and Overhaul just keeps playing with his face downs, builds them from his hand, picks them up from his stage, blocks with no progressive, can just have the right block whenever he needs to have the right block, can stash things, put tricks down there, that sort of thing. Pretty capable of playing sort of an extended game where he's building up a big stage and playing a lot of defense. So both those characters are very good. I think they're probably going to rise a little bit compared to the Jetburn meta in popularity as, characters that can ostensibly, kill younger Toguro pretty quickly, but also, have the tools to defend against him, and by that time, that's kind of what people are probably looking for right now, because it's not that awful to defend against younger Toguro, and it's not that awful to kill him, but it's just kind of hard to do both. So, those two characters seem like standouts as ways people might try to approach that. This isn't to say that younger Toguro is going to be 50% of the format or anything, but he is the elephant in the room. I would expect him to be 10 to 20% of that event, and it's the kind of thing where if you're not prepared to face, especially the Death Younger Toguro that just won the Wish tournament, I'm not really sure what you're doing. That is the one deck you should make sure that you can fare well against if you have the chance heading into this webcam regional or to any LQs you might be going to. On the maybe side, these are the characters that are a little similarly shaped. Genkai is newer. I played her at the Wish tournament. I got 2 draws because I couldn't kill people fast enough, and then I dropped. So she's definitely a project character. There's something there. She can put damage on things. She takes damage off of things. She has a weird form of card draw / top deck peak. There's a pretty nice package there, but it's going to take a lot of work for people to figure out that deck. Mimic has been around a bit. He's an asset-themed 6-hand size character that can, when he checks an asset, he can go pick up an attack from his discard pile, and there's lots of cool things you can do with that. You can make like a little toolbox in your discard pile. That's a bit of a specialist deck. We simply don't know where he's going to be at in the new meta. He's been ranged from very good to okay over the last couple metas. And the next one is Endeavor 2, the starter deck Endeavor from Heroes Clash that I put on all of these lists because I never stop putting him on lists. He's, once again, just a nice, well-rounded stats go up, stats go down kind of guy. He did get some interesting pieces in Hiei's support in the Dark Tournament, so we might see him pick up, even if just as a sideboard option for Toga, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But he's around and about. I'm never surprised if he shows up somewhere and does well. The next group I want to talk about is sort of defensively minded 6-hand size characters, and this doesn't say they have no offensive abilities. This just, if you're playing them, you're probably playing them for what they can do on defense, and figuring out how you're going to kill people is maybe the hard part. That's sort of a work in progress that you're trying to figure out as you work on the deck. I would say Hawks and Jin are probably going to be the most popular in that mix. Hawks been very popular since he released. His deck is going to have to change a lot. He's another Order character that lost a lot of Set 1 tools. Might not be an Order deck anymore, might become a good symbol deck or even evil. I'm not really sure what it looks like, but there are definitely some Hawks fans out there and people that have played a lot of Hawks and have worked on a bunch of different versions of him. And he is, a fine choice if you want to sort of play defense in this format. He has this mechanic where he goes and gets these feather cards from his discard pile that he can use to put speed on or take speed off of things, and a bunch of like trickery related to that. So he's pretty neat. No idea what the actual Hawks decks are going to look like. I'm just assuming that they're out there. Jin, kind of similar. 6 hand size, speed goes up, speed goes down. He has a negation effect. He was allowed to be played in the Wish tournament and got trounced just like everybody else. But all the same, you know, he's one where I could see people working on their decks after the Wish tournament, iterating on it. There could be people who didn't play in the Wish tournament for one reason or another that have their Jin, and they're like, my Jin's better than the ones that were played at that event, that could show up with him. He's got a lot of attention when he was previewed, and I don't think one tournament where he didn't do too well is going to stop people from bringing their Jin decks if, you know, this is their guy that they've been working on. On the more niche side, we have Suzuki, which he's hard. I'm not too high on him, but some people are. He does a lot of drawing cards, discarding cards. He can block with the top card of his discard pile, and then when he takes damage, he readies. So he gets almost a couple bonus cards to block with off the top of his discard pile, and you can do some stuff to manipulate that and try to get the right cards on top, and you'll find more good things to block with, and on offense you're discarding cards and drawing cards and finding your attacks and that sort of thing. But he doesn't do anything statistically, which is the challenge for people to solve. But I know there's been some excitement over a couple of different Suzuki lists out there, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if he keeps showing up. Hiei, you know, once again, another Dark Tournament character that did not perform in the Wish event, but once again, another character that's simply going to take a lot of work to figure out. Giving -2 speed to everything is a fine defensive baseline. The fact that you can almost certainly land at least one attack on any given attack turn is also a good way to sort of grind out a game. It's just you really need to tighten up your defense if you're going to try to win the game slowly like that. Right? Either that or figure out some options of the right attack lineup that can sort of push the pace, accelerate a little bit. But, you know, if somebody's working on Hiei, I could see them showing up and Hiei doing well at any given point this season. The next character is Tooru Haaku, the second Tooru Haaku from the My Hero Academia license. She is from the Heroes Clash set, and she has a couple of interesting things going on. The first thing is she can commit to, after your opponent plays an attack, they put it back in their hand and have to replay it. So it kind of makes it harder for people to play out long strings against her. She has this form of pseudo speed on her as well. So she gets, the more foundations they play, the faster her moves get, but it's modifying your opponent's block modifier, so stuff that messes with speed, reset speed, doesn't really help them. So she's got an interesting offensive angle to her, and she has a character-specific Breaker 2 on a card called Invisible Infiltration, which is extremely good. So she has all that going for her. She has been quite silently popular. There's a bunch of events where nobody was really expecting or preparing for Toga or thinking about her. Nobody really called her part of the meta, and she showed up in Top Cuts anyway. I think she made a couple finals even. So she's always around and about. There's always a couple people playing her and kind of putting up some surprising results here and there, so never be too surprised if you run into her. But I wouldn't call her, you know, a deck that I'm anticipating, which is kind of just always the case for that character. The last one in this group is Nezu. Nezu got a bunch of stuff from the Dark Tournament set, particularly off of the Order symbol. He gets to draw cards when your opponents draw cards, and there's a bunch of Botan stuff that makes your opponent draw cards. And so people are pretty excited about Nezu. He is very much a weird, complicated, build your toolbox, figure out exactly what, you know, 68, 73, God knows how many cards you need in your deck. You're doing a lot of picking and choosing. Your character, once again, does nothing for you statistically, so you have to figure all of that out. So definitely a project deck, but if somebody, you know, finishes their project, they're like, all right, I've gotten this Nezu to where I feel good about it, they'll bring him to an event and they could definitely do well with him. The fourth category I want to talk about here are HP sponges. These are characters who are reacting to the jet burn meta, so to say, the 6 hand size put damage on everything. A squadron of characters, of the half dozen to dozen of those that there are, by just saying, well, I'm going to make you need a lot of damage to kill me. So we play high health totals and a lot of damage reduction, a lot of life gain. Byakko himself has 38 health, play some damage reduction cards. Over time, you're going to turn your opponent's entire stage face down. You're going to put huge damage on things. He was the second most successful character in the Dark Tournament Wish event by a seemingly a pretty wide margin. Basically, pretty deep into the event, there was a list of undefeateds, and it was like 8 younger Toguros and 5 Byakos. So he was holding his own. I expect the Byako contingent to continue working on their Byako decks and continue showing up with them. You know, we'll see how they do, but he's going to be there. He's for sure going to be there. The other one that's gotten a lot of excitement is Recovery Girl. I hate this character, but when she gets hit, she gets to pick up a foundation from her discard pile and build it. And so the more foundations they make, particularly foundations with destroy effects that she can loop, the more stuff they make that rewards you for destroying foundations, which there was some of that in this Dark Tournament set. The more things with flip costs that she can destroy with her own ability to then rebuild after you flip them. Just like the stronger and stronger she gets with the card pool over time. The Recovery Girl players are excited about a bunch of new interactions that they found. They're a little bit wary of stuff in the format that can commit your character, so that's a big problem for her, and both Ryukyu always runs one of those cards, and Toguro can. So that's a bit spooky, but some number of people are going to show up with her and try to ruin people's day with just this seemingly infinite health pool, you know, if she gets set up, with which all the damage reduction and life gain she can put together if that's what she wants to do. So, you know, I keep that in mind. On the other side, the stuff that I could imagine showing up, but I don't presently hear a lot about, Kuwabara is, you have the definition of HP Sponge. If you're just trying to soak up damage, that's kind of what the guy was made to do. Muscular made a little bit of a pop-off late in the last format. With sort of a damage soak type of list, he gets stronger the more attacks keep landing. And he was a little bit overshadowed. Yeah, that's the word. Overshadowed by a character called Nomu from the first MHA set, but Nomu's rotated now. So if you want to play the style of deck that their Earth build was running, you know, obviously you've lost any other set 1 cards that were in that mix, but Muscular's kind of the guy to go to for that now. We'll see if anybody reprises that and tries to make stuff happen. The last one is an errata character, the errata Kirishima 2. His twice per turn became once per turn, but I've heard some talk about him as, you know, maybe people gave up on that errata version too quickly. He has a response where he takes half the damage from an attack rounded down that he, you know, just without even blocking, he just halves the damage from an attack. So over the course of time, he can soak up a lot of damage and have a lot of effective health. And then it's like a lot of defensive characters, just a matter of figuring out how you're actually going to win the game. But he has a little bit of help with that. He has a little bit of card filtering, so... And a little bit of damage and some support cards that he triggers. I don't know if he needs... He might be a character that really needed a lot of set 1 stuff, but I put him on there because he's another guy that's kind of the definition of sponging health. The next group is a pretty big group. We don't talk about 7-hand size characters, so... People are pretty down on 7-handers right now because... As I said earlier, the nature of the format is these 6-hand size damage pump characters, if they draw, you know, all the good ones on turn 2 and they, you know, they check running 5s or whatever, or some of them, I mean, clear their pool and don't even need to check running 5s, right? In Toguro's case. If you're a 7-hander that's kind of planning to just, you know, block more and have access to more cards and have more tools, but you have 10 less health, it can very often not... The extra card can be not necessarily helping you anywhere near enough to make up for... you know, them needing 1 or 2 less attacks to kill you in that turn 2 situation. So people are pretty scared of playing 7-handers in general, but that doesn't mean you can't. It's just, you know, a higher bar for the amount of defense that you need to have access to. You need to be willing to accept that there's going to be some RNG games where, you know, the luck just goes a certain way where you get turn 2'd, it's just going to be a part of life for some of these 7-handers, but on the flip side, you know, if the game goes on, you can use that card advantage to generate a better situation. You know, give or take, you know, there's a lot of card draw available now, so, you know, the 6-hand sizers could be drawing more cards than you are, which is a bit of a thing. But nonetheless, there are a few 7-handers that have some excitement behind them. Elder Toguro's repeatable switch speed and damage ability is very, very, very good defensive ability. If they are slamming damage on everything and you make that not matter because you turn that into speed and just take the hit, maybe reduce the damage a little bit and take the hit, then, you know, their 6-hand size damage boost character isn't looking so exciting anymore. And he also gets to go search his discard pile for whatever attack he might be looking for. So there's a lot of appeal to that. A lot of people are pretty excited about playing him. Once again, you know, the ones that showed up to the Wish tournament did not hold up, but similar to Jin, I think there's a lot of people that did not play in the Wish tournament that are going to have their Elder Toguro list that's somehow different from the ones that were being run, because there's a lot of different ways you can build him. The next mention is Toga. Himiko Toga, the first one from the Crimson Rampage set. This is probably going to be more of an aggressively minded deck. Just try to kill them first kind of thing. As a 7-hander, you can, and you can certainly afford to play some amount of defense, some tricky action cards, that sort of thing. But for the most part, the idea here is that she benefits a lot from Hiei's support from the Dark Tournament set that rewards you for getting down to 10 health or less, and Toga is very good at getting herself down to 10 health or less. So you're playing all of those cards, and you're doing... Toga's won multiple events, so you're just doing a lot of traditional Toga-type things, but with the mixes, you get all these power-ups for 10 or less health that equal or replace some of the stuff he might have lost, she might have lost in rotation there. The last 7 enhancers I want to talk about in the highly likely group is Tamaki Amajiki. He lost a lot with rotation, but he also gained a lot from Dark Tournament. We don't really know how that's going to shake out, but like some of the stuff that he's getting in Dark Tournament is just very flashy and exciting, and I don't think everybody is going to be able to resist. There's definitely going to be people that are going to be wanting to try the new cards in their Amajiki, and they'll figure out the defensive side of it and just try to scale to the moon with Giant, Armor of the Wolves, Armor of the Apes. Those Momotaro cards from the Dark Tournament set are largely quite good for Amajiki, and I think he's almost certainly going to be some of those showing up. The kind of like, maybe this will show up at some point list for the 7-handers is really deep. Because these are kind of all in the bucket of, these decks are going to take a lot of work to figure out. Shigaraki, Edgeshot, and to some extent Jiro 2 were pretty popular in the prior format, even with Jetburn Legal and all those, all those characters around and about. As people get to feel a little bit more down on the 7-handers, in particular like Elder Toguro and Toga maybe supplanting Shigaraki in popularity, I could imagine these characters falling off. I haven't heard a lot about them recently. But they could show up, they could not show up. They've been popular in the past, but, we'll kind of see. The other 5 are, Nejire's kind of like Endeavor 2. She's on all of these lists. Her stat game is just sort of obviously good, but it's so open-ended, and she doesn't... In particular, she doesn't put speed on things. She has to figure out how she's going to land moves. But -2 speed on everything, +2 damage on everything, at least when you want the speed or damage, because you are paying a cost for that. And the health regeneration is really just a blatantly, obviously good package. But nobody's quite been able to turn that into a tournament successful deck yet, but it could happen at any time and nobody would be shocked. The other 3 are some Dark Tournament 7-handers that are all just a little more complicated to build and figure out. I left Kurama off of here because a bunch of people did show up with him and got nowhere, and I don't... maybe they'll show up with him again. Maybe there's a couple Kurama players in the wild, but I don't rate that very highly. I think his builds are kind of more straightforward than these 3, so I think it's a little more likely to see one of these 3 just kind of sneak in. I'm referring to Toya, Karasu, and Shishu Wakamaru here. Toya was really, really bashed when he first was previewed, but people are starting to come around a little bit to him. The idea of committing one of their foundations every time you block is a little more exciting when the rule of the meta is that you're trying to block Younger Toguro 4 times. If you do block Younger Toguro 4 times, Toya says he's almost certainly not playing a 5th, right? And so that's pretty appealing. Again, you have to make the offense work, like a lot of these decks, but you do get to put mega speed on something once each round, so you'll presumably get there sooner or later. But again, this is a deck that somebody's going to have to come up with from scratch and figure out. Karasu has a very high peak damage potential. His good attack turns will kill anything. That's kind of all he does, but that has its appeal. And Shisha Wakamaru has some like really, really spicy aggro play, a 7 difficulty echo attack for free lines that again have a lot of potential. You have to figure out all the moving parts around that. He gets momentum very easily, and you can leverage that for stuff, but what does that deck look like? It's going to take someone some time to figure that out. Best Genius has been around for a little bit. He came out in Jetburn. He got pretty much any time they print ranged attacks on the symbols, people are going to give him another look. We'll see if anything results from that. All right, the almost lastly, I kind of just want to cover some of the other aggressively minded-ish 6 hand size characters that aren't necessarily in the stat stick model as what I call the Jetburn characters, but that people are probably going to play. There's a lot of buzz around Himiko Toga 3, the Clash deck character from Jetburn. They keep printing more weapon cards. In this case, I believe, no, definitely some from Dark Tournament, probably some from the Trigun Cowboy Bebop Challenger decks, but she keeps getting support. There's some like weapon stun overlap support that's really good for her. And she's turning much more into a you're going to stun them all the way out type of deck, and kind of the only one in the format right now. So she's got her own unique angle. There's some stun hate, but not going to protect you against they want to stun you out all the way stun hate. So she's interesting in this format. We'll see if the people playing her actually succeed or not. They feel pretty confident, but we've seen a lot of Toga played and not succeed before, so we don't really know, but she's going to be around for sure. The other character that has some excitement is Kendo Rappa, and this is mostly over, I believe, a couple of Dark Tournament cards, Deadly Claw and Double Fists of the Mortal Flame. He is a play a lot of punches character. He just wants to play a really big string of punches and blow up his stage passing the checks. And those are both punches, and one of them rewards you for not having very many foundations, which he often will not. And the other one gives you a momentum, which he needs for his big bullet punches move. So there's some people checking in on Rappa. I would expect a couple or a few in this webcam regional and beyond. Will it amount to anything? We don't know. But I think people are at least going to try him out. On the other side, I have a bunch of like not necessarily aggressive, all of them 6-handers, but stuff that's worth noting. Kota and Mina 2 have both, and Asui 3 were all kind of around and a little bit popular in the prior format, and there's nothing really stopping. Kota got a bunch of new cards even, but that doesn't necessarily mean the people that were playing those decks are going to keep playing them. But they are around and about, they do some stuff. The other 3 are just some stuff I've been noodling about lately. We have a small contingent of Chronostasis fans that are pretty excited about some Dark Tournament tools that he got. His whole thing is that he gets to play certain attacks twice, Breaker or Tech Attack specifically, but he didn't really have any great options until now. So there's going to be some work done on him, at least by myself and some other people. We'll see if that goes anywhere. He also has the very exciting property of younger Toguro does not get to build his first move. He has to wait till his second move, and Murio does not get to put Phantom Threat in his momentum. Those are two very good things to be saying in this format right now. Is that enough? Once again, he's a guy that doesn't put any stats on anything, but he does get to play the good ones twice. And we'll see if that gets anywhere. There's also All Might 7. This is the Ball Might promo and the Fantasy Broadsword promo All Might, basically the convention promo All Might that's around and about. He's another beneficiary of some of the kind of weapon support that we've seen more of lately. The more of that comes out, the more interesting he's going to get. And he has this third... This is kind of similar to Toy. He has this third ability that says, like, if you block 3 times, you commit their character. And that's kind of like a ha-ha funny joke until we're in a format where you're trying to block 4 times, right? So now if he can use some like chaos tooling to bounce blocks back to his hand and actually pull that off, that's almost a real ability now. Some of these Jetburn characters actually don't want to be committed after 3 attacks. They actually still care, right? When they're 4 or 5 attacks deep, they want to put damage on those too, right? So he's kind of interesting right now. Oh yeah, no real known builds. He has popped up in some top cuts here and there. I think mostly overseas. I think mostly in the UK. There's someone that picks him up every once in a while. So he's not a character that's never had success, and he's getting more interesting as time goes on here. Last one here is Eraserhead 3? There's 2. Eraserhead 2 from the Heroes Clash starter decks. This might just be a me thing. I've just been thinking about him a little bit lately. There's a water high attack package that people are trying to put in all sorts of different decks, whether it's Uraka, whether it's Asui. We haven't really solidified a home for that pile yet, and it could be Eraserhead. There's some reasons to run that on him versus some other characters. So I went ahead and put that on here. He's kind of like a speed version of Asui almost, if people prefer that. And then last, I just want to touch on a few 5-hand size characters that are not necessarily in the soak damage camp, that might show up because they very often see a couple of these, at least historically. We'll see if that continues to be true. Minoru Mineta, too, has some sort of dedicated following of people that play him a lot. He clogs your card pool on really both sides and tries to, crunch down on the number of foundations that you have. And as he gets momentum, he can 0-speed attacks. In a format where the elephant in the room is younger Toguro, he doesn't line up with that very well, or at least he doesn't seem to. But that doesn't mean people won't play him anyway. But he seems really poorly positioned right now, about as poorly positioned as he's ever been. But again, there are some people that just always play him, so I'm never surprised when I run into that. Mei Hatsume gets better the more assets that are good that they make, and they keep making assets that are good. So we saw one sort of pet project, Mei Hatsume, in one of the December-January webcam events on stream that was pretty exciting, and she's only gotten more assets since then. Is that going to add up to a real competitive deck? We're not sure, but again, another character where if somebody's working on them, they could pop up. Fourth Kind has actually gotten some buzz lately. The only thing, because... So you get the 5-hand size health pool, you get to take a block back to your hand, which helps you block younger Toguro multiple times, right? He's going to build to 6 foundations, and Fourth Kind has a 1 per game that stuns them 4 if they've built to 6 foundations. So these all seem to be pretty good properties to have in this meta. It's just that offensively, aside from his once per game, he gets to put +4 damage and -4 difficulty on 1 attack per turn, which is cool, but maybe not good enough. And he shares 3 symbols with Endeavor, the Endeavor 3 that's up in that Jetburn 6-hand size character. So kind of the take right now is that a lot of Fourth Kind decks might be better off just being Endeavor, but if somebody finds a list that feels like it's really justified being Fourth Kind, or they just like Fourth Kind better, they maybe will run him. I could even see some like main deck Endeavor sideboard Fourth Kind kinds of plans could exist. So yeah, he'll be around and about. And that is a wrap then. That is, I didn't actually count how many characters are on here, but it looks like we have like 17 characters I would say are sort of anticipated to show up. And then, what is this? 14, 22, 30, well, 31 more that like could show up if somebody makes them their pet project, or they're more popular than I think they are, or whatever. So there's a pretty good variety in terms of what's available and out there that you could play with a straight face, especially if you're willing to put some time in your deck and work on it. We'll see how all of this holds up, right? How many of the characters that are, not in that like 6-hand size group can hang. Probably a decent bunch of them, but we don't really know, and we'll see how it plays out at this regional, at the LQs, at the major regionals as we go on. I imagine if younger Toguro has another huge showing at this webcam regional, that we might see some card actions taken against him or something in his most commonly played decks, but we'll see how that plays out. Some people are thinking he's gonna run Roughshot over the event. Some people are thinking he's gonna come down to earth when he's in the mix with all these other 6-hand size decks. Yeah, that's kind of the lay of the land right now, I think. And so I'll wrap it up here. Let me know what you think. If I wound up not flashing a single card on the screen, if you're a newer player, let me know if this sort of thing was useful or understandable at all. I try to talk about characters, but it's all very, quick descriptions, that sort of thing, and you don't really get to read any of them in a format like this. But, let me know what you think. If there's a character I didn't leave off, that I left off of this project meta list that you think I'm crazy for leaving off, and you've got the coolest Kurama deck in the world that we just haven't seen yet or whatever, go ahead and yell at me. It'll be funny. But yeah, until then, have a good night.